a clip with you all from the movie Dances with Wolves. How many of you all have seen that movie? Kevin Costner, 1990. I actually saw it in 93 or 94 when I had just graduated from seminary and started working as a chaplain resident at Grady Memorial Hospital in downtown Atlanta. Grady is a huge public hospital in downtown Atlanta, and this opening scene, I'm going to give you a little info on it, particularly those of you who haven't seen it. Kevin Costner is a lieutenant in the Union Army in this scene, and he has had some kind of injury to his lower leg, foot, ankle, wherever on his lower leg. And you'll hear two doctors talking about amputating it, and one of them saying, I can't go any further until I get some coffee in me. I can't saw it if I can't see straight. So they leave him on the table, and you'll kind of see what happens next, and then I'll fill in kind of what happens after this clip. Needless to say, while I was at Grady, well, not needless to say, but while I was at Grady Hospital, after seeing this, I started noticing the tremendous number of folks that I saw either walking or being wheeled around with amputations. And so the movie really hung with me, and I'll come back to that afterwards. But let's see the clip that we get. Thank you, Scott.
Is this the last one? I don't know. There's no Ether either.
You there? Is this the last one?
There's no game. Well, it will be if it doesn't come off soon.
Well, I can't solve. I can't keep my eyes open. I'm sorry. Let's coffee up. You can.
Okay, so again, you heard them saying that the one doctor said, I can't saw if I can't see. So he's going to let the patient wait and go and get some coffee and get himself to where he could do the role that he had to do better. The thing that follows is that Kevin Costner's character decides to commit suicide effectively. Then he steals a horse and he rides in between the lines of the Union and Confederate soldiers, rides straight towards the Confederate soldiers, then rides down the line, and everybody misses him. And they start hooting at him, the Confederate soldiers, to come back, give him another shot. And so it's like, sure, that's kind of what I was after, right? And so he starts riding back. Well, at that point, the Union soldiers realize that the Confederate soldiers are distracted by all this, and they end up routing the Confederate troops in that battle. He then becomes a hero, has a different kind of medical treatment available to him, and the rest of the story is about him as he goes out into the West and connects with Native American tribes and that type of thing. But as I was at Grady Hospital and noticed the number of folks with amputations, it was an eye-opener that there are different levels of medical treatment. And so I want to talk to you today about the parable that Jesus shares with his disciples towards the end of the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew 25, you're probably familiar with it, where he talks about people at the end being separated like sheep and goats. Sheep on the one hand, goats on the other. And he says, when I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was sick or in prison, you visited me. When I was naked, you clothed me. And on and on. He said, whenever you did it to one of the least of these, you did it to me. And so I want to talk with you about three different groups of the least of these that aren't really mentioned in Jesus' parable. The first one is as I think about my own parents. My dad's almost 83, my mom was almost 78. Dad was diagnosed with diabetes probably about 15 years ago and has become the model diabetes patient since then. He controls it almost entirely through exercise and diet. He is on an oral medication now to help keep things in line, but a fairly low-level dose of that. But at 83, he's also starting to slip memory-wise, and he can't do cognitively everything he used to do. Some days and some moments are better than others, but if you were his physician, you might not know that he used to be known for his memory. He was a scientist. He was a professor at Texas A&M. He'd have classes of 150 to 200 students, and he knew every one of them by name, first and last, by the end of the first month. He was known for his memory. Not so much now. Mom is doing fine on her memory, but she's had 3 knees replaced. There are not many people who have 3 legs to begin with, much less. But she's had 3 knee replacements, a hip replacement, shoulder surgery, foot surgery, staphyectomy, and Mom is she also has osteoarthritis and compression of L2 through L5, I think, vertebra from having fallen down in the garage. So Mom is dealing with pain constantly. And when you meet Mom, what you might see is someone who is battling with pain, trying to keep it under control, and realizing that she has to do certain things in a certain way to keep the pain from getting out of control. But you wouldn't know how active she was when I was growing up, how our house was the Kool-Aid house, you know, the house where all the kids in the neighborhood gathered because Mom always had stuff set up for them. You wouldn't know about the different ways that she served the community just by meeting them. So as you go into hospital rooms, particularly for those of you who do go into hospital rooms, you may see someday that folks have pictures of the patient from 40 years ago, 30 years ago. And often what they're trying to do is invite all those involved in the medical care to see this person as a person. Not simply as symptoms, not simply as a diagnosis, not simply as a body to be fixed, but to see the person that's there. I think what we all come to discover in the helping professions is that we connect with some people more than others. Maybe we go into a room and we see somebody and they remind us of our parent or a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle or a friend or a child. And all of a sudden, the level of care we offer is different than it would be for someone else. Getting to know our own biases, learning to check our biases. When possible, learning to hear the stories of the people that we're serving. And I know you guys will be under tremendous pressure to get into the room, to figure things out, be out of the room in 10 minutes or something like that. And so you won't always be able to know the stories. Even as a pastor, the stories I learn about the people that I love and serve, I often learn the best stories when I'm preparing for their funeral. And so often we won't be able to hear all the stories and really get to know the person. But Jesus' invitation is that whatever you do for the least of these, whatever you do for someone else, you're doing it for me. And so to learn to look at that person that we're serving, whoever they may be, and see the face of Christ in that person, see the image of God present in that person, and treat them as we would treat Christ if Christ were our patient that day. Now, on the other hand, second group of folks that I'd like to share with you about that might be considered the least of these are those who are suffering with mental illness of one form or another. And maybe when you have someone who is struggling with a mental illness as a patient, whether in dentistry, whether you're a nurse, whether you're a physician of one sort or another, most of you probably won't be psychiatrists, but there may be a few of you in the room who will be. Maybe you don't know that now. Maybe that's still a piece in process for you. But sometimes what we need folks to do is not look at the person in the sense of what we assume to be their character based on the actions that they're giving at the moment, but rather to recognize that this person in front of me is also a body, is also a machine, if you would, is also something that is influenced by biochemical things going on in their brain that they don't have control over. In the church, we're just beginning to learn how to be a caring community for people who are suffering with mental illness. We've got a long ways to go. You all can be some of the folks who help us learn how to do that better. We have folks in our congregation who are really leading the way and helping us learn how to do mental health ministry, how to be involved in suicide prevention, how to understand folks who are struggling with mental illnesses better. And unfortunately, it's also true that among all of us in the room, about a fifth of us at one point or another are going to struggle with some level of mental illness. About 1 in 17 of us are going to struggle with a serious mental illness. Anything that we can do to help others understand what you think you're seeing is not really the person. It's somebody who's dealing with a biochemical disorder. And there are ways to help that involve pharmaceuticals, that involve counseling, and that involve a community of people who try to understand, who try to be there for them, who try to provide support. So the first group, again, of folks that I'm inviting us to consider how we respond to with the love of Christ are those who are elderly, and we may not see them the way they really are. We may just see the diagnoses, the symptoms that are in front of us. The second group is folks who are struggling with mental illness and not simply trying to see the character, what we think is the character from the person we encounter, but to recognize that there are biochemical things going on in their lives that they don't have control of. And there are ways that we can provide help and support so that they may not be healed or cured from their mental illness, but may be able to better live with it and monitor it and work through it, kind of like my mom trying to manage pain. The fourth group that I want to invite you all to think of as the least of these are you yourselves. Those of us who go into caring professions often have big hearts. We want to help other folks. We're willing to work long hours. Have any of you worked long hours studying in the last week or two? Yeah. We're willing to work long hours to be the best we can be for someone else. We go into rooms and we find that someone is not going to make it no matter how hard we try. And that can be heartbreaking. We go into rooms and we realize that no matter what we do, we can't save this child from the decisions this child's parents are making. We go into a room and we recognize that there's so much more going on than what we can do. Maybe we're a specialist in one field and we can only help with one area, and we can go home and carry all that with us, and it can really weigh us down. One of the things that I am exploring and discovering here over really just the last 3 or 4 years is the power of the contemplative practices in the Christian life. In the Protestant church, many of us come from a Protestant background, and even those of us who come from a Catholic or some other background, we may not be in touch with contemplative practices. We may be aware of the value of quiet time, but if we fill that quiet time with reading the Bible, reading a devotional, doing things that are active during that quiet time, it's not quite the same as if we're involved in the contemplative practices that invite us to a place of silence, to places of solitude. There was a poem, I'm going to run back and grab my phone real quick, that I encountered in college that kind of speaks to this, and it was from Alfred Tennyson. Quick background on this. When I was in high school, and I was a biology major until my final year of college, when I felt a call moving from medical ministry and mission medical ministry to ministry in the church, with youth in the church. But in my high school years, I had a lot of questions and a lot of doubts as to whether God even existed or not. And somehow when we were studying the eye and the ear, the intricacy of those organs just filled me with awe. And somehow it's not any kind of proof, so to speak, but it took my questions away. And so an invitation to one contemplative practice in silence is simply to allow ourselves to take in the world around us, whether on a walk or sitting in a natural environment somewhere, even just sitting in your backyard or in a park somewhere, and being awed by what we see around us. In this poem by Alfred Tennyson, he's doing that. He writes, "Flower in the crannied wall, I pluck you out of the crannies. I hold you here, root and all, in my hand. Little flower, if I could but understand what you are, root and all in all, I'd know what God and man is." So this kind of picture Alfred Tennyson holding on to a flower and realizing, and he probably didn't even know about cells and atoms and that kind of thing. He was writing in the 1800s. But with what you know about biology, just think about holding a flower or a leaf, something in your hand, and trying to contemplate everything that you know about it from what you've studied, and to realize, to really know everything there is to know about this flower, where it came from, how it came to be this way. There's almost nothing in the universe you wouldn't know if you came to know everything there was to know about the maker of the flower and how the flower came to be the way it is. And so an invitation to carve out time in your extraordinarily busy schedules, to take a walk early in the morning, to take a walk late at night, to find time where you can sit alone somewhere, ideally in an environment where you can see nature around you, to allow your hearts to be filled with awe, to focus on something right in front of you, simple, that allows all the concerns, the fears about whether I'm going to pass this class, whether the patient that I'm working with is going to make it or not, whether I can do anything to help this child that's in a terribly difficult situation with their family, to let those things pass away for a moment. To let the Spirit of God speak into your life, healing, restoring you, giving you strength for the days ahead. I want you guys to be great doctors. I'm probably going to need you many times over the course of the next 40 years. I hope 40 years still to come. But I also want you to be healthy, to be whole, to be able to hang in there for the long haul, and to continue to see the face of God in every person you serve. Because the temptation over your ministry, I was going to say, and I hope it will be, but over your career, your ministry, will be either to so protect your heart that you fail to see the face of God in the people you serve, or to be so overwhelmed by the need in the people that you serve that you fail to be able to feed yourself. So make sure, not guilt, just an invitation. There is one who will sustain you, who will carry you. And an invitation is to simply find times, whether it's long retreats or short windows, even 15 minutes that you can take out between classes. Allow yourselves to get quiet and open up and seek the God who has been seeking you all along. Thank you all very much. One final thing while Scott's coming forward. I talked with Greg while y'all were getting started on food. I spent a month in the Yucatan Peninsula after my sophomore year in college working or volunteering in a clinic there. It was a fascinating experience. I ended up spending a year and a half after college, when I knew I was going into seminary, working with a missionary in that same area. Even if you don't picture yourself going into medical missions for your career, I invite you to consider whether spending time in another country, another culture, another kind of setting, where the work that you do is fully and completely ministry. So let that kind of percolate, ferment in your minds. And reach out to Greg. There will be other folks. Greg could help you. Scott can probably help you get in touch with folks. But even if that's not your long-term goal or your long-term career, it could have a powerful, powerful impact on your life and on the lives of the people you serve. Thanks.
Amen.